Food and Wine Insider is a weekly look at a $1.5 trillion industry touching every American. Visit us at foodandwineinsider.com.
And all the way from France, where he heads up the marketing effort for Fromagerie Hutin. I know I butchered that terribly, but Christel Vibrac is with us to talk about Cheese Week and about his company, and he's going to tell you the proper name, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Ann.
Little background, Christel Vibrac is the key account manager from the Fromagerie Hutin, which was founded in 1922 by Henri Hutin. He was the master cheese maker. Thanks to his know-how, the cheese plant never ceased to evolve the production of brie and of soft-ripened, pressed soft-ripened, and spreadable fresh specialty cheeses. Mm-hmm. Today, La Fromagerie Hutin enjoys an excellent reputation on the export market and is known for meeting the consumer's expectations and demands. Christel, welcome Food and Wine Insider. It's great to have you on the show to talk about one of my all-time favorite foods, cheese. I love cheese. I could eat cheese. In fact, I probably do eat cheese every single day. Please tell us a bit of the history of the famed Fromagerie Hutin. I believe, actually, as I mentioned, the business started nearly 100 years ago, and it was sold to Hochland Foods in 1978. If you could give us a little background, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's correct. So thank you very much for welcoming me in this radio, And so Henri Hutin started to work in his own factory in 1922. And so he started with only few cheeses, let's say maybe 10 or 12 pieces per week with brie, and grow because, in France at this moment, there were a lot of small factories which grew very quickly, let's say. So then, unfortunately, when he was 75 years old, he didn't have any sons or family, to manage the factory. So Hochland in Germany bought Henri Hutin and helps us to grow, and especially in the U.S. market.
How big is the business today, sales in U.S. sales dollars, and how many people does the company employ?
So our company, Fromagerie Henri Hutin, has around 35, let's say, employees. But, Hochland worldwide is more than 4,000. And so I can give you, the annual turnover for the U.S. market. The turnover for Fromagerie Henri Hutin is around 110 million euros. We work in euros, I bill in euro, not in dollar.
No, absolutely. No, I understand perfectly. And where do you make the products today?
Where?
Where, yes. Location.
We are in the east of France, in a very green area named Lorraine, and we are in a small village with the cows, the grass, and so on. So everything to produce very good cheeses, and especially the brie.
Right. I know from my experience in international food that Europe was way ahead of the U.S. on the whole question of non-GMO. Because in the U.S., most of our soy crop and our corn crops are mainly GMO. I remember wanting to take some products to test in Europe, and I couldn't test them because Europe was totally non-GMO. All of Henri Hutin production became non-GMO in January. Why is non-GMO so important in the cheese category?
So it was very important for us, to guarantee, the good security and, healthy for our consumers. And so this certification is German certification because, our parent company is in Germany, and this is where the market is the bigger. But it is very important for, I think, all of the countries where we sell our cheeses to have this certification. So this certification is not yet recognized by the USDA, but we are working to see if we can have a non-GMO verified, label. But for USA, it will be. We will have to work again on this, and we are, the first and only French brie manufacturer to be certified non-GMO. So this is good for the consumers because Belle Étoile and Couronne are well known, and now they have the proof that they can eat these cheeses and we won't have any problem and so on. So it was a very good and long project because it took 2 years, to educate the farmers and procedures and so on. But now we are very happy with this, and we are proud of, what the teams but also the farms did, so that we could get this certification.
And to be non-GMO, just explain to people, our audience, what that means to be a non-GMO cheese.
So that means that, all of the animal feed is not genetically, I don't know if this I pronounce well, but anyway, are not genetically modified. Because, there can't be any GMO in the milk and the cream, but the problem comes from the animal feed. And worldwide, it's amazing, how many animal feeds that contains, GMO and especially in USA.
Okay. And your product categories include soft ripened cheese, fresh cheese, red wine cheese, and soft pressed cheese. Can you just describe really simply the difference between these 4 categories?
So the soft ripened cheese is what we produce more in France. This is a brie or like a camembert. So this is, milk and cream, and you can add double cream to have 70% brie. The fresh cheese is more like not your cream cheese because it's, let's say, more fresh or fresher. But this is not the same production, but this is similar to explain, And the red green cheese is a soft ripened cheese like a brie, but more, let's say, how could I say this, more or less dry. And the rind is not washed. This is just a red color, but non-GMO too, for sure. And the soft pressed cheese is what you can find, like slices, but very different. This is like a big brie, first produced in log, and then we cut it and sell it, like the slices, the Swiss slices, and so on.
Okay, great. One of your more famous soft ripened cheeses is the Lacroix 70%. It's a triple crème soft ripened cheese. It was first introduced in the 60s, interestingly enough, and the first triple crème ever exported to the U.S. It's free of preservatives or artificial flavors or emulsifiers, and it's non-GMO. So what does it mean to be a triple crème soft ripened cheese? Why are these attributes really important to cheese?
So the Belle Étoile, the triple cream cheese, as far as I know, was created by Mr. Henri Hutin in the 60s, because he said if we add cream in a traditional brie, a 60% brie, what will we have? And he created the triple crème, soft brie. So, and Belle Étoile means beautiful star. So, that you will eat something very with a high quality and very different from the domestic brie and so on.
So if you were to describe it against a brie that an American consumer would be familiar with, what would you say makes the product different and better?
Yes, for sure. Because for several reasons. The milk is different, the technique is different, and so the domestic brie is very different from the French one, and especially our Couronne brie, because Couronne is a lactic brie. And a lactic brie, when you taste it, is like a raw milk brie, but this is pasteurized milk. So that's amazing. This is typically from France.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so describe the taste that would be different for the American consumer to eat of your French Bellatois as an example.
Yeah, so the flavor is richer and is smooth, and let's say that there is a very creamy texture. This is not dry and Couronne is not too fatty, not too lean, just right. So like France knows.
No, that's very helpful, because I think people are trying to imagine, so what does it taste like and what makes it really different? And I think you've given some nice adjectives to that. I'm going to shift a little bit. As you know, a few years back, the FDA, which is the Federal Drug Administration, took a very strong stance on raw milk products because of an outbreak of listeria. It's required that the production of cheese with raw milk must be aged for a minimum of 60 days at a temperature no less than 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And after 60 days, the acids and the salt in the raw milk cheese naturally prevent things like listeria and salmonella and E. coli from growing. In France, one of the requirements for triple creme brie cheeses is the use of raw milk. What's your view on the raw versus pasteurized milk in the process for making cheese?
Mm-hmm. So, speaking of FDA, we had an audit, from FDA in January. So I'm not a specialist of the quality, requirement and so on, unfortunately. So it's very difficult for me to explain this to you. But anyway, we have, regular analyses here by our laboratory. But we also have analyses from veterinary certificate and so on. And when we export to USA, we must add a lot of documents to prove that our cheeses are well pasteurized, with the right requirement and so on. And if you don't do this, you will be on a blacklist from FDA and USDA, and you won't be able to export anymore. So we must, follow the rules.
Yeah. And has that been a difficult process? Because, you want to make the cheese in the way that is traditional, that is the way, historically it's been made. Has there been any challenges or any adjustments you've had to make to sell your cheeses in the U.S.?
Yeah. So that's why, this is like we produced our own, or like, French guys like the cheeses, but anyway, we have a special technology because of the shelf life first. We must guarantee a very long shelf life. For example, when we deliver the goods, or let's say when the vessels leave France and go directly to California, it takes a long time. So the shelf life must be okay. So we have a special technology for USA, and Brie Couronne and Belle Étoile are sold only to USA, or let's say export.
Okay.
But
and
they will create it for you.
Sure. Oh, thank you. And so, how long is the shelf life as the product comes into the U.S.? Because obviously it has to go through the distribution system, it has to get to the shelf, the consumer has to buy it. All of these take time. What is the shelf life as it leaves France?
So our regular brie is 90 days shelf life. So it takes 10 days for between the reception of the milk and the packaging. So let's say, 80 days left, and we work with a very good forwarder companies, in France. We deliver directly to the port, and let's say 10 days less, and 8 days to go to the East Coast when the weather is good, because since the beginning of this year, a lot of vessels, were delayed.
Sure.
And if everything, is without any problem and so on, let's say it remains 60 days from.
Okay.
But that's enough. We also work with importers, and they have facilities to cut and wrap the cheeses, and with good rotation. So you must be, or you must work with the right partners.
Right.
From France and in the US and so on. The only thing that we can't control is the weather, unfortunately.
That is true. Don, do you have any questions for Christel before I continue?
No, I don't. You're doing such a great job. I'm learning a lot. So please continue.
Okay, thanks, Don. I was going to ask, so who are your major customers in the U.S. for the cheeses?
You mean the distributors or the direct
I would say more the direct. We can talk about the distributors as well, but I'm curious as to where would the consumer find your cheese?
You can find Bethel, everywhere. So in supermarkets as well, in groceries or small cheese shop, I work with 27 importers in the U.S. and we are, in each state. So, and if you want to speak of a brand, let's say, you can go to Publix, Kroger.
Wow! So you're in the big supermarkets. Do you do any food service as well?
Yeah. Yes.
Like the restaurants.
And we work with Cisco too. So
okay.
One of our importers is Cisco. So that's why we do food service, retail, smaller grocer. Our partners in the US work well, so they have a lot of possibilities. That's why we do our job. We know how to produce. I know how to sell, and our importer or distributor, know how to distribute, the cheeses. And I often go to USA, and whenever I'm there, I will do some store checks, and our cheeses then really nice and without any problem. And even I would like, to buy the cheeses there. So.
Well. I did want to shift to, for the second year, and from April 16th to the 22nd, Cheese Week will be held in New York City, and La Fromagerie Hutin is proud to have its French Brie and specialty cheeses featured. Please talk about the importance of this event and where your products will be sampled.
So it's very important for us to be there, just to, this is education, because let's say that the culture in the U.S. is different from ours. So now everybody knows what is a cheese, but we always, must be, let's say, regularly in USA just to do education. So this week will be education. We will have some chef, at Le District in New York, that will cook our cheeses. I will do personally some demos at the bars. There will be a big event at Bloomingdale's with we will exhibit our cheeses, explain the visitors what this is exactly and so on. And there will be also an exhibition at the French Cheese Board, and I will do a class. I will teach how to eat the cheeses and where they are from and so on. So this will be the first time for me. So I hope that this will be okay. But the French cheese board is a very, very nice place, to promote cheeses from France.
Yes.
For sure.
And so, are consumers welcome to attend these events? How does it work?
For the event?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't understand. Sorry.
Yeah. So this is open to consumers, and anyone can attend, or is there
to everybody? The district is a good restaurant, so you can go there. The bars you just have to go into, and I will sample, the cheeses. So Bloomingdale is open to everybody for sure. And for the French cheese board, you will have to register before. This is the only event where you must register before.
Okay.
This
and so No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. No.
No, I just want to be sure people know that the brands that you'll be doing some of the tasting come from your Belletoile, which is Belletoile in Coron, and your Coron range, which is Cour. Does that mean heart, right? ONNE range, and it's at Le Districts, it's at Zabar's, and it's also at Bloomingdale's.
Yes.
And I think it's terrific. You'll have demos and recipes. What would a consumer typically expect to pay for one of your cheeses in comparison to, let's say, an American cheese?
I didn't understand. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. What would be the retail selling price of one of your cheeses as compared to maybe an American brie or a brie from somewhere else? I'm just trying to give people a perspective on what kind of premium there is for your fine cheeses.
Let's say this is around $12 or $13 per pound, and the domestic brie is nearly the same, almost the same price. So between domestic, let's say between 9 and 11, and our imported brie, depending on where you buy it, for sure, is between 13 and 15, 16 maximum.
Wow. So there's no reason not to buy a wonderful imported cheese from France. The original makers are the best cheese. So, can you talk a little bit? I think I have maybe a question or two left. What big lessons learned have there been for the company in producing such a fine product and making it available to consumers, especially in the U.S.? Any big lessons learned? Anything you'd like to pass on?
I'm sorry. There were a lot of noises and I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, no
I'm alone in my office, but anyway.
No. I will try it again. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about any big lessons learned for the company in producing such a fine product and making it available to consumers in the U.S. Anything that you say, wow, from a business standpoint, here's a big lesson learned for us as La Fromagerie Hutin.
It's a very difficult question. Because I'm French and it's very difficult for me to answer. I'm sorry.
No worries. So let me shift and give you a different question. If you were to give someone who desired to get into the cheese business, we have there's an American Cheese Society. There's a lot of very local cheesemakers even in the U.S. And I think they're amongst the most passionate entrepreneurs in any category. There's something about producing cheese that makes people really happy. What I wanted to know is, if someone were new wanting to get into the cheese business, what advice would you give them?
The exportation to USA started in the 60s, so I was not born. But anyway, now we can be. So I work with wonderful customers there. But if we need help, I can, contact Business France, because Business France does a lot of things for, the introduction of French cheeses, and not only cheeses, but French food. And I also, have a look regularly at the Specialty Food Association, the newsletters and so on. We are a member of the Specialty Food Association. And I find a lot of information from this association. This is,
wonderful.
The both Business France and Specialty Food Association.
Okay, wonderful. The last question is, I'd like you to give our listeners a website and where they can find your products. So the website for your company is
www.henri-hutin.com. All of the categories that we produce and so on. Of course, I'm available, for any question from USA. I have a US toll-free number. Well, you can call me. This is 1-800-659-2603. And that's it.
Okay.
John, I hope to see you at the Cheese Week.
I love that. Sure.
Yeah.
Don, anything else that we need from Christel?
Well, all I got to say is it's been a very interesting interview. Christel, thank you so much for joining us from France, and we look forward to seeing you at the Cheese Week next week.
Yeah, and I would like to thank you for your patience, because it's not easy when we are in France to have this is the first time for me for this interview radio, and I speak like a French woman, so I would like to thank you very much and hope to see you next week.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
To be successful, most restaurant owners require extra capital from time to time. When you need funding to renovate, buy equipment, or manage cash flow, you don't have time to track down financial statements or wait weeks for a decision. That's where Cabbage can help. Cabbage gives small businesses access to a line of credit of up to $200,000. Apply online and you'll get a decision right away. Since Cabbage is a line of credit, you can take the exact amount you need. You never have to reapply to take additional loans, and you'll only pay for the funds you use. Cabbage has helped more than 230,000 businesses from every industry. And with $4 billion in funding, Cabbage is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau and was named the Forbes Top 100 Companies twice in a row. Check out Cabbage at cabbagewithak.com/food-and-wine, and you'll get a $50 gift card when you qualify. That's KABBAGE.com/food-and-wine. Line of credit is subject to credit approval. See terms and conditions.
Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz. I want to tell you about Bob Bethel. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. Dan Perkins with your featured book.
You are listening to Ann Daw and Don Mazzella, and the program is Food and Wine Insider.
And our next guest is Phil Harris of Ripe.io. Phil, welcome to the program. Will you tell us a little bit about what blockchain is and how it's going to affect everything we do over the next couple of years?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, I think that it's one of those terms which is now unavoidable if you are following general articles across many industries. This could be from health insurance, financial services, real estate, shipping and logistics. It seems that every single one of those industries has some observation or examination going on in and around blockchain technology. The simplest definition to give is that it's a distributed network or a decentralized network that allows for an ecosystem or a group of participants to come together and share, record, and validate data within the network without the need of a centralized authority or centralized standard against those particular records or data sharing or transactions that are going through the network. And it's as simple as that. Now, it takes, a lot of people, the majority of people, a lot of times to hear that, to start to really unbundle those words and understand them, and then, compare that against the industries that they're working in. But I hope that at least that very simple explanation has made at least some sense to you, Anne.
Well, I just want to say welcome, Phil. Again, it's Phil Harris. He's with Ripe.io. That's RITE.io. He has been around blockchain technology for a very long time. I think you worked both in financial technology as well as innovative companies. And what I really want to focus a lot of time on today is what Ripe.io is doing to change the way food systems actually look at the whole data transparency, really from the farm to the fork. And, in today's day and age, even the consumer wants to know, well, where did their food come from? And I would think that anyone sort of selling the food at one end wants to know sort of in simple terms, sort of where did the product come from? Does it have all the right certifications and so on and so forth. So I think that what I wanted to start with is, how did you get attracted to the food space and the use of blockchain? What was the kind of the problem you felt like you were going to solve in the whole food space?
Yeah, thank you, and that's a good question. So I will preface that I've been around blockchain technology for 4 years. So that's not, that's at the, the kind of early stages of it, but I think you can apply dog years into the scenario here, because, 4 years around this technology is somewhat in the early stages, at least when it started to become more mainstream. So you're right in that had the great fortune of seeing this technology actually when I was an employee of NASDAQ, the U.S. Or more global now stock exchange, and we were tasked to really look at the technology for what it might do for inclusion within the general technology used at the exchange. It's the first place really that got the most kind of traction and attention: financial technology, financial services. I was involved in a company out of San Francisco in 2015 that was set up by myself and a few colleagues. We, set that company up and sold it relatively quickly. And upon exiting that company, it gave myself and some of my colleagues a real opportunity to sit back and actually look at many different industries for where blockchain might make the most sense. So what we were kind of looking for were large industries, industries that had fragmentation, industries that had, certain answers or certain problems around efficiencies and optimization. And so, we probably analyzed, I think, something around 11 different verticals, from, health insurance, regular insurance, shipping, logistics, law, real estate, digital royalties, music. I mean, there was an exhaustive examination that took about 9 months, 10 months. And then when we found our way to food and agriculture, what hit us was that, number one, yes, the industry is very fragmented. There's a lot of silo participants that don't, typically communicate with one another. We hadn't seen a meaningful digitization event occur, meaning that lots of participants still use, spreadsheets and faxes and telephone calls to conduct business or share information. And then extracting some of the themes that you had raised earlier, Anne, where we looked for drivers that would, accelerate this, transformation, if you like. And on the regulatory side, there's a strong push coming from the regulators that want, food companies to be more informed about all of the life cycle of food as it passes through the supply chain. And here in the US, obviously, there's FSMA that's making companies, learn and know more about their supply chains. But then on the other side, there's also a strong pull from the consumer that's becoming ever more curious and now almost demanding about everything related to their food. So when we found those kind of ingredients, so to speak, in the food and ag supply chain, the push and the pull, when we put our kind of thinking caps on, and we saw this combination of technology becoming available, which is kind of big data and AI and machine learning and IoT and sensors and blockchain. Those three technologies in combination, in concert, are going to, effectively digitize the food supply chain and transform it into something which, hopefully can do a better job versus the job that it does today. So that's a long answer, but that's the accurate answer.
It's a great answer, and I really appreciate that. So I'm going to come down and sort of see if I can have you describe something that will almost tell the story. So take us through a blockchain for a farmer who wants to ensure that he harvests and delivers his crop on time. What would you be doing for the farmer, as an example?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different dimensions that you can bring into, make an example or try to tell a story of where, these technologies may or may not make sense. I think that, I'm gonna use a blockchain term here. It's a term that we would like to have a different name for it, but unfortunately we're stuck with the label, which is something called a smart contract. And a smart contract is really an automated routine. So it's a little bit of code that you tell it to do something once it sees a piece of information or reads a sensor, let's say. So in the example that we're trying to patch together here, if you say that there is a farmer producer of, let's say, a tomato, there is a distributor or a logistics firm that's going to move that tomato from the farm to a pack house or some other intermediate. And then ultimately that tomato is going to end up either in a salad bin at a restaurant, in a pasta sauce, or on a pizza or something, right? So, the end state obviously is always very different. In those three separate actors, they don't really all know at the same time what's going on with that tomato. So the buyer, the consumer-facing entity, let's say, the salad bin where the tomato is going to end up, they'd like to understand more about what was the environmental growing conditions of that tomato. What were the seeds that were used? What were the chemicals used? Is it an organic tomato? Is it IPM farmed? Or, many, many different dimensions of data, which is kind of stuck at the farm level and doesn't make it up through to the buyer or then onto the consumer. Then in the middle, the distributor would like to make sure that if they're going to take possession of these tomatoes, that they meet the buyer's requirements, maybe around organic or maybe some, specific element that might make sense around being local. One of my favorite things to talk about is what is local? Is local 10 miles or 100 miles? There doesn't really seem to be a consensus. So if we kind of just unpack some of those things by taking all of these data sets and embedding it onto a distributed ledger that now is shared amongst those three players, now every one of those individuals can do their job better because now they see more information that allows them to understand, well, yes, this indeed is an organic tomato because I can see into the data sets and understand that. Once the harvest occurs, there is a message or a smart contract is used to inform the other participants in the network that these tomatoes are ready to harvest and then move through the supply chain. And, you know, I think if you start to use your imagination, you can come up with many, many other different scenarios to insert to understand how you automate. So really it's about, you know, each one of those actors, the farmer, producer, distributor, and buyer, we're trying to simplify it. They all benefit from understanding more about what's going on in their individual roles in the supply chain. Then by extracting that information and sharing it on a distributed ledger allows for a lot more efficiency, but then also a lot more trust in the system that you can see into the other person's work and have a greater degree of comfort that when you say that this tomato is local, I can actually use sensors and devices to follow that tomato on its journey all the way through to the end destination. So you can actually calculate the food miles that it traveled. And so therefore, when you make that assertion or that claim to the consumer that this is a local tomato, now you can actually say, well, local in this case was, you know, 250 miles as an example.
You know, it sounds to me like it's almost like a holistic view of supply chain. You know, it used to be, or it still is, you know, the farmer, his job stops when he's sold his product. The distributor takes possession of the product and gets it to the retailer or the food service or whoever, and then his job stops. And then, you know, it's like there's a stop and start in the current system. And what it sounds to me like what you're saying is that it's not about that. It's about everyone knowing everything about what's happening through the whole supply chain to make better decisions or to be more efficient or to get the freshest product possible or any of those things. Have I got that straight?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to think about it. I think the one equation or the one actor in this food supply chain that's kind of the most important being the actual farmer, right? The person that grows these tomatoes, if we continue to talk about tomatoes. And, you know, they are as curious where their product is and what is it, you know, what is the feedback from the buyer? What do the consumers think about this tomato that I've grown? You know, did it end up in a salad? Did it end up in a pasta sauce or a tomato soup? You know, they are equally as curious for the same information, but from the other side of the supply chain. And there's not a good way of getting it back to them. So they want to connect with the information as much as the consumer wants to connect to the information. But, you know, obviously the kind of the infrastructure isn't available to address all of the above. But if you've got a farmer that is you know, growing really delicious, tasty, fresh products, and they want a platform or the ability to communicate up through the chain how good this product is, and then they want to understand more about, you know, the feedback loop of, you know, where it's going and what the customer experience is. This kind of infrastructure enables the completeness of all the information, so all the parties get what they need out of it. But then by bringing in certain automation and bringing in, you know, something which we see happening, you know, kind of, I think that the tsunami is coming to food and ag around digitization. And so, you know, what I mean by that, I'll pull from some other industries that have kind of gone through this before. So if you think about, you know, what Amazon did for books, digitized books, allowing me to kind of more information about what to read. And so, you know, the algorithms now know what I like to read. And so, you know, they recommend things that I should read based upon my preferences. The same can be said for music and television, that now, you know, things are being presented to me, that the palette in this case, are my eyes or my ears. Well, if you can digitize food, and you can have a lot more variables to describe food, and so that when you look at a tomato in a salad bin, they kind of all look the same, right? I mean, maybe the skin is a little bit different in texture, but what about if I could learn more about where it came from, the farming practices, even to go as far, what is it going to taste like? Is it going to be salty, or sweet, or acidic in taste profile? If I can have all these new dimensions about this food object that I'm about to eat, well, if you digitize this and you give me more information, now I can start to actually do things on that information, right? So I can pair certain taste profiles of certain foods with others, and really kind of manage my menu either from taste or nutrition elements. And so this is a kind of digitization event around food. It's one of the last, I guess, sectors of industry to go digital. And by doing so, you can look into other verticals that have gone through this before to understand if I'm a more informed consumer and now I have this digital relationship with my food, I can now make a lot more smart decisions about what to cook, when to cook it, what to cook it with, and then, play into kind of that health and wellness and nutrition aspects too. So it's a lot more than just where did it come from and is it organic? When you layer in all these data threads, it gets super exciting.
So, Phil, what size business do I have to be to take advantage of this type of blockchain? In other words, do you have to be doing a certain amount of sales for a blockchain to make sense?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, that's something that we face every single day when we're running this company. I mean, we have a mission to work with all sizes of food participants, big and small. And so, the larger entities have, the ability to, spend money on technology and experiment. But then, some of the smaller farmers, 100 to maybe 400 acre farmers, the budget for things like sensors and technology in general, they're not cheap. I hear that a lot in my travels, that farmers are cheap. They're not cheap. They're just very smart about how they spend their money. And so, we're trying to work and model our software and services and our commercial model to be inclusive of all participants, big or small. And, we don't have all the answers yet. It's probably fair to say. I think the medium to large size participants, we've worked out price points and commercial models that are being accepted by these participants. The smaller farmers, we're still trying to work out a model that would include them too. But yeah, we really want to include everyone. I mean, that's the honest answer. If you grow something that's tasty, delicious, and nutritious, and we want to give you the platform to be able to stand on your soapbox and sell a lot more of them. Sensors are not required at every customer deployment. Sensors give you information around the environmental condition of the farm, and that's really, for trying to, work on information attributes which are very specific for end customer use, for things like, transparency, telling me about the farm and the farming practices and what kind of products or what food is grown there. This information just can be captured without the use of sensors or IoT fabrics. And a lot of distributors, and food safety and cold chain people to move the food around the supply chain already have sensor fabrics already embedded into their, trucks and whatnot. So I think what we see, and what we've seen actually in the last 18 months, is that it's a bit like your cell phone. Cell phones weren't that, the functionality and features and functionality of a cell phone, 5 years ago. They were big and they were clunky and they barely made a phone call. And now look what we've got in our hands, this device that really can get me information and just do an amazing amount of things. So the functionality and the capability increase and the price points go down. That's happening in the sensor industry too, across all industries, not just food and agriculture. It's happening in automotive. And so we see that trend continuing. And, we do see, IoT playing a very large role in supply chains regardless of the industry. And so, we just have to hope that trend continues, that the features and functionality increase and the costs decrease. And so that, we'll be dealing with sensors that, 5 years ago, maybe $1,000, and now you're getting them, under $10 and maybe even under $5. So I think we're very early into this transformation. But, if you look and compare and contrast to other industries that have gone through similar digitization events, the technology will end up being at the right price, offering the right service, and then, it will just kind of work as designed.
Not only is this your application good for the food industry, but you also see it applying to many other industries as well. Did I hear that correctly?
Absolutely, that is correct.
Okay, but in your view, can you give us one or two that you think are really ripe and appear to be the ones that are most likely to move forward quickly?
If you think about being able to register information on a database, but then have that database shared with a large number of participants within an ecosystem, it's a recording information. So what about things like real estate and ownership of buildings or stocks or shares, or pieces of art or a film or a song, right? Anything where I need to record my ownership of this object and then place it on a ledger. When you start thinking it in that term, then you can understand what this technology can do as a backbone, where now, I create a song, I put it on this music ledger, and now anybody that wants to use my song in a TV commercial, in a movie, on a streaming service, they come to me, and there's that smart contract or that bit of software that says, yes, you can play my song, and here's a fee associated with that, and I now have total control over my work, and that can be spread across many, many other industries. So I think in the kind of the movement, I think 2013, 2014 is where other industries started to take this technology very seriously outside of financial services. And I think, 14 and 15 were all about examination, education. Late 15 into 16 was around experimentation, piloting and prototyping, doing things internally as well as experiencing, what a startup might bring in terms of their thoughts and capabilities. And I think now 17 and coming into 18 is going to be about actual deployments of the software. So I think you're going to see, not just in the food and agriculture business, but in many industries, blockchain becoming, a big part of the supply chain. And if you think about the internet, it would have been very difficult to find the words to know how transformation the internet would be in the future, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But now it's all around you, right? It's in plain sight, and you interact with it many, many times throughout your day. And it's our belief, and I know this belief is shared with a lot of other people, that the blockchains are bigger in the way that they'll transform the way that data and transactions occur in this new digital realm that we live in, and that the ability for blockchains to be everywhere in plain sight and to be a bigger deal. And I think we certainly share that projection of what what this technology could do, and it will be multi-industry. It won't just be financial services. It will be, you'll have blockchains doing things in your car, in your refrigerator. It's going to be interesting to watch.
And I want to ask just one more question, which came up
Sure.
in a news item this morning. I see your application being very important in the baby food industry, where we have many mom and pop operations now offering various baby foods but at the same time, mothers and fathers worried about the purity and effectiveness. Is that something you thought about or have heard anything about?
So I've heard the stories about a lot of counterfeit baby powder, milk. It's either being imported or exported connected to China. I don't know the specifics. But yes, I've heard of counterfeit milk products, and the ability to enable transparency, to allow for the consumers of these products to have more information around the traceability and authenticity of said products. Yeah, there are applications that make a lot of sense. We've heard a similar story for pet food, where people that don't have children, it's a lifestyle choice, but they love their animals as much as they would love their children, and they care very much too about what they're feeding their animals, and there's been a lot of problems in the supply chain of pet food about whether they are really the ingredients and etc. So yeah, no, these are the things that blockchain will help. It's not a panacea. It won't solve all the problems, but I think it will bring a lot of bad behavior into the light, and hopefully eradicate some of these, or try to work on all of them, but certainly eradicate some of these bad actors in the supply chain.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time, but I think the point that you made about authenticity and that being so important. It's not just a trend; it's here. It's the consumer wants to know where the products come from. They don't want to just sort of say, "Oh, because you told me this is I should believe it." They want the proof. And so my last question was really, what should consumers know about blockchain and what confidence it can give them in the quality and the safety of their food supply?
Well, the blockchain is the tool to be able to expose all of the attributes that are being collected from the totality of the supply chain. And in the software business, in the data management business, there's this saying, garbage in, garbage out. Right? So you want to make sure that the data that you're recording is the data that it says it is. And so, there's a lot of work to be done in terms of making sure that when somebody tells you that tomato is organic, as an example, that you need to have a good process around the validation of that particular message. And so these are the things where now, technology and existing processes will align, but we think that bringing these opaque processes and workflow where there is no transparency on certain attributes of the supply chain, if you bring them into this new digital realm and you expose the behavior, if you think about when you're buying something online and I'm buying a mountain bike and I bought a mountain bike off this person and it only had one wheel, and now I'm sharing back to this kind of community, hey, don't trust that guy because the last bike I bought from him only had one wheel. Well, if other people have that experience, now they won't buy bikes from that person, and so their business will suffer. And so, it's kind of funny that you have this transparency that lifts the behavior of actors in the supply chain, and we think a similar dynamic works here. So making this more transparent should reinforce good behavior, and therefore, work on some of these issues that we've just explain. But it's the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. It's new thinking. It's definitely transformational, and it's going to take some time to really kind of work out the kinks. But we think that using this technology and digitizing the supply chains and opening up all this information should improve it.
I think you made a couple of very important points there. Is the whole notion of garbage in, garbage out, and a lot of information is now available. The question is it the right information? Is it true information? And that's going to take a lot of sorting out.
Your website again and how people can reach you?
Yeah, I think we're on all the general social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and then the regular old website, ripe.io, RIPE.io. That's how you can find us.
Thank you so much for being with us today. It's been a real pleasure.
You've been listening to Food and Wine Insider with Ann Daw and Don Mazzella. Want to join us on a future show? Contact us at foodandwineinsider.com. Until next time, have a passion for food, wine, and profits, and think of our program, Food and Wine Insider.